So this tutorial is going to be on switch statements and if-else-if statements. So for our example, we're going to create a short program that will take this oper variable, this oper character, and depending on it, it will perform an operation on two integers, num1 and num2. Let's say that num1 equals 13 and num2 equals 3. It'll perform whatever operations put here and onto these two integers. So to do that, we're going to start with an if statement, which you should already be familiar with. Now this only handles two cases, the case in which it is plus and the case in which it isn't. But let's say we also want to handle the case of if this character is minus or if this character is modulus, an operation that I'll introduce. So in that case we want to handle three things. So let's add another if statement here. So this is the syntax for else if. You just type right after the else, you type your next if. Say the minus here. You can piggyback as many else ifs on here as you want next to each other, you know. It doesn't matter. And if you want to, you can close it with an else. And that's what I'm going to do instead of creating another if statement. I'm just going to assume if they didn't put a plus or a minus in there, that what they meant to do was perform the modulus operation. So inside here you put your logic. Alright, so two things here. One, this is the modulus symbol, %. What this does is it performs division on these two numbers. And then it takes the remainder and returns that as the result. In our case, 13 divided by 3 is 4 1/3. So it returns that 1 bit, the numerator of the remainder. In the case that this were 12, let's say, and you did a modulus on that, it would return 0 because there's no remainder. Let's just keep it 13. See whether or not I'm a liar. And I'll change this to modulus. The other thing that I want you to notice here is that I'm redeclaring result each time. Before, I showed you syntax where if you wanted to reassign a number, you would do something like this here, where you don't put the int in front of it because the program already knows what type of variable it is, and you don't want to redeclare it. In our case, it's not redeclaring because of scope, which we talked about in lesson 6 and loops. The thing about this right here is that this integer named result only exists within the scope of this if statement between these two angle brackets. When it exits out of the if statement, it no longer exists to the program. So for instance, when I'm in here in the second if part, I have to redeclare it because if I were to just put result here with no integer part, then it wouldn't know what I was talking about and it would throw a compile error. So there we go. Expected result 1. That's the modulus between 13 and 3. Okay, so now switch statements. The syntax for switch, the keyword is, hey, switch. Then in here you put the thing that is conditional. in our case, it's operator, because if it's plus, if it's minus, or if it's something else. So that's what we're going to type in here. Just operator. Then the syntax is case, and then what we want to check for equality. Switch statements assume equality. You can't do a case statement for not equals to. First off, that doesn't make any sense, but like, why would you want that in a switch statement? But you just can't. So we're just putting this bit in here, what it's equal to. So plus, and then you put a colon. Then after that comes your logic, which we'll just copy from up here. And then it works like that. And then you can just go down to your next case statement. Let's say minus. We'll just put the same logic here and just change this to minus. For each case. But after the logic for your case, you want to put the break keyword that I also introduced in loops. And the reason for this is that in switch statements and in case statements, if you don't put this break here, then it'll assume that you want to fall through to the next bit of logic without checking this case statement, which is not what we want. We don't want if it's plus to perform this and then print this to the screen, and then to perform this minus and then print that to the screen. We want to stop and then continue on through the rest of the program. So you put this break here. There are cases in which you might not want to put a break. For instance, let's say we wanted the character A to also be a valid thing for addition. In which case I could just type that. What this does is it looks funky, but what it'll do is, in the case that it's A, it'll, do nothing. But since there's no break here, it'll fall through to the next case statement and perform its logic until it either reaches a break statement, like here, or it reaches this closing bracket. Okay, and then for our modulus, instead of this last else here, in this if else, we're going to use the keyword default. And default is triggered if none of these cases are true. The break isn't necessary for default, although if you want to put it on there, it doesn't hurt. It's not necessary because there's no logic below default. Default is always the last case command, and so it'll hit this bracket before it can go on to another case command. So let's try to run this and see what happens. Great, I get an error because int result is already defined in main. What's that about? Well, it's another scope issue. I am actually redeclaring it here. Result already exists. It's already been declared. So why is this different than this if statement up here? It's because it's within the same set of brackets. So it's within the same scope. So you have to be aware of that in case statements. It's not just a cut and paste sort of thing. There are differences. So we have to get rid of this because this is already declared. And the program already knows what result is within this scope. So resave it, recompile, and there you go. It's printing out the same result because we're telling it to do it in two different places. In the if-else, and we're also telling it to do it in the switch. So there you have it. Introduction to else-ifs, switches, and the modulus operator.